But let me just remind those of you who have been around through September, or if you're relatively new, since I got back after Labor Day, I've been saying repeatedly, I love this God stuff. While I was away this summer, I asked myself the question, why? Why do people go to church? And what is it they get out of faith and spirituality? What are they doing here? As I thought about my answers, I came to the conclusion that there are a lot of reasons to love this God stuff. Such as, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about spiritual growth and learning together. And last week I talked about serving and giving that makes life purposeful. And this week I want to suggest worship. I love this God stuff because of worship, which takes many forms: praise and thanksgiving. All right, let me start by noting that worship can be both a verb, something you do, and a noun, an event or a place. It's a noun when we say, I'm going to worship. I'm going to worship at the 9 o'clock service at Wellington Square. You're going to an event, and it's a noun. You're using it in that term. It's a verb when we say, let's worship God with open and grateful hearts. Okay, stay with me here because I can feel my eyes wanting to glaze over, because this front part is a little bit teachy, but hang in because we're going to have a lot of fun at the end. And Tim's got an exercise for us regarding gratitude, attitude. We're going to get there. But if we're talking about worship as a verb, as something we do, an activity, there's action to it. Just what is it we do on a Sunday morning? I want to say we engage in ritual drama. Ritual drama. By ritual, I mean we use certain fixed forms of actions and words. If you come here, the ritual drama you're going to get here is prayers, hymns with great lyrics that recount sermons, messages. By drama, I mean that the telling of a story is woven through these rituals. We do these things, sing, hear sermons, pray, and in it all, there's woven this story, the story of God and God's mighty acts of salvation. You recount, you retell, you relive again the story, and you celebrate. You remind yourself, oh yeah, well, there's a God who cares, and you just go through it. In some way, each week, we retell the story. Let me give you an example of a ritual drama from our own everyday lives. When we joyfully worship God, we do essentially what I did last month, September of 2017 was the 45th anniversary of what great historic Canadian event? Anybody know? September of 1972. Okay, if you're unfamiliar with this bit of sacred history, Canada beat Russia in the final game. Last month, they were recounting, I'm not sure why, but there was something on, and they replayed the clip. Our Canadian team was down 2 goals coming out at the third period. They played their hearts out, they tied the game, and then in the last seconds, I don't need to tell most of you, Phil Esposito dug the puck out from kind of behind the net in the corner, threw it out front, Paul Henderson whacks it in, and pandemonium broke loose all over Canada. 6-5, we won. And you say, but Orville, you know everything that's going to happen. Why do you watch that again? My answer is that's precisely the point. I watch that game over and over because I know what will happen. Certain values are reestablished and confirmed. Certain truths, good triumphs over darkness, evil, good triumphs over evil. Okay, something like that, but in a better, purer form, is what should be happening in Christian worship. The Bible's full of all kinds of this ritual drama. Listen again. I read parts of this to you a couple moments ago. I read all of this to you. I'm going to give you the fast version. Ken, throw me that shorter version up here. When you have come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This is the priest saying to the early Hebrew people. You shall make this response before the Lord your God. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt, lived there as an alien. When the Egyptians treated us harshly, the Lord heard our voice, brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power and the signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place, gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. That, my friends, is worship as ritual drama. Retelling the story. It's good for us. It's healthy. But how so? How are we helped by remembering, by giving thanks again, by these acts of worship? I want to suggest a couple of benefits. And the first one is it instills a true perspective with a healthy humility to it. I was alluding to this about 10 minutes ago when I talked about that psalm and the front end of the psalm, confession. We need to do that. Here's why. I read recently a headline about medical research that is now coming to the fore, and the research is startling. The headline said, "Power causes brain damage." They don't mean electrical power. They mean having power over people, over a corporation, or over a company or a nation. Power goes to our heads and causes brain damage. Really? Yes. The clinical evidence from neurological researchers at, listen to this, Cambridge, McMaster, Princeton, and beyond suggests that, quote, subjects under the influence of power, this is the head of corporations, head of governments. Nah, that could never happen, could it? Somebody who's been the head of a big corporation and then becomes head of, you couldn't have. Subjects under the influence of power acted as if they had suffered a traumatic brain injury, becoming more impulsive, less risk-aware, and critically, less adept at seeing things from other people's point of view. Yikes. A British neurologist who went into government, he was a medical doctor, neurologist, and he was elected to Parliament. He wrote a book about this, and he described it as, quote again, an acquired disorder that the medical literature doesn't recognize but should. He called it the hubris syndrome, a disorder of the possession of power, particularly power which has been associated with overwhelming success, held for a period of years and with minimal constraint on the leader. Can you see this? I read this and I thought, that's what happens. Because so often, this is just my observation, and don't affiliate this with any political party or government leader, but it feels to me like so often somebody gets elected as premier or prime minister or president, and they go in with all of this pure intentions and good. And 8 or 10 years later, there's scandal after scandal that they've been manipulating, or you get it, you know. Another researcher said power is a sort of tumor that ends, a brain tumor that ends by killing the victim's sympathies. And the end result is a hard heart, a blind eye, a cold shoulder. to the needs of people in the world around us. Now, I read all that research, and right away I said, that's why worship is valuable. Attending a church service should give us a gentle reality check. I'm not God. Neither are you. In worship, we acknowledge a higher power. And that power is the only great power in the universe. We're reminded in good worship that we are all at times mistake-prone, sinful. We have a lot to learn, and we are still and always in need of guidance and growth in our personalities and in our lifestyles. We always need more maturity, more generosity, more mercy, more compassion. Worship at its best reminds us of all of that and keeps us humble. That's healthy. Here's something else. Good worship does more than keep us from a swelled head or a hard heart. In fact, I want to propose the complete flip side of that. The exact opposite benefit. Sometimes we need building up. Sometimes we need affirmation and reassurance that we are important. Self-esteem and confidence. Good worship should give us that. A couple of years ago, a minister I know down in the States was invited to preach in an all-black congregation in the ghetto of his American city. He arrived for their 10:30 morning service, expecting to participate in an hour or so of worship. He didn't get up to preach until well into the noon hour, 12:30-ish, when he got up to preach. Before that, there were hymns and praise songs, gospel, a lot of testimonies, prayer for specific needs, hand clapping, singing, dancing. The benediction, when he finally did his little sermon and they concluded, the benediction didn't happen till after 1:15. It was nearly a 3-hour service. And he was exhausted after. So he asked, why do black people stay in church so long? Our worship never lasts much more than an hour out in the suburbs. And the black pastor smiled at him and said, listen, unemployment runs nearly 50% in this neighborhood. For our youth, the unemployment rate is much higher. That means everything my people see and hear during the week tells them, you are a failure. You are nothing because you do not have a good job. You do not have an expensive car. You have no money. So we gather them here and we get their heads straight. Through the singing, the prayers, the message, we say to our people, out there is a lie. You are somebody. You are royalty, chosen and loved by the God, creator of the universe. And then that black pastor said, it takes me so long to get them straight because the world perverts and abuses them so terribly. Worship, getting close to God so you know the real truth about you, that you are precious, treasured, known, loved. What else does it do? One more thing. It gives us God's view of things, God's perspective. And that's the long view. It's things that you don't normally see. It's the unseen. And in worship, we begin to see with God's vision. Worship can be especially valuable when this kind of worship, when disaster or pressure hit. Quote from a theology prof at Yale University said, worship and praising God in the midst of and in spite of whatever's going on in your life that restores your position and your perspective and the integrity of who you are. The psalmist had it right. I have this printed on your bulletin, and Ken will throw it on screen. I will praise the Lord no matter what happens. I will constantly speak of his glories and grace. Let all who are discouraged take heart. Let us praise the Lord together and exalt his name. Slightly, sorry, Ken, I gave you a different translation. I like the one I just read. I will praise the Lord no matter what happens. I will constantly speak of his glories and grace. Let all who are discouraged take heart. Let us praise the Lord together and exalt his name. Okay, what that requires is a unique and an accurate vision of what's really going on, of the true state of things. So your vision isn't just limited to what you see right here or what's going on this week in your life. Your vision sees God's perspective that the rest of the world can't see. To worship and praise the Lord no matter what happens requires being able to see beyond what is going on at the moment. People of faith have double vision. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain it this way. I'm going back to a sports analogy. Work with me, those of you who aren't. Last night was the Leafs home opener, right? I saw about 10 seconds of it, but it was tied 5-5 and then 6, and somebody missed a convert, I don't know, but anyway. Obviously wasn't great defensive hockey. Let me take you back 34 years. On a Saturday night in October 1993, the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing the Philadelphia Flyers at Maple Leaf Gardens. Hands up if you remember Maple Leaf Gardens. Oh, good, okay. The Leafs got behind early in that game, October 93. As the game went on, it was obvious they weren't going to catch up. By the third period, Philly was winning something like 5-0. All right? This was the old Leafs. But something strange was going on. In the midst of this game, there in Maple Leaf Gardens, when the home team's being blown out, at seemingly weird random moments, the crowd was erupting in cheers and celebration. People were doing the wave in the stands. Fans were cheering. There was a constant buzz, even when there was a stoppage of play and waiting for a face-off. The crowd was buzzing. Why? Were these people crazy? Didn't they know or care that the Leafs were losing? Here's why. While the hockey game was being played at Maple Leaf Gardens up on Carlton, 12 blocks south at the Sky Dome. Anybody know where this is going? The Toronto Blue Jays were playing their World Series game against the Philadelphia Phillies. Hundreds and thousands of